How you doing, Dan?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, thanks. Trap, I just want to introduce you. This is Chris Trapani, founder and owner of Sereno Group, currently with multiple offices around the Bay Area to provide outstanding real estate service to everybody living here, right?
We've got some great people. We're very fortunate.
No, we really do actually have some great
I
people.
believe we do.
Yeah, I think it's a great
Agents
company.
and support staff, it's a pretty magical place with good people.
I totally agree.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I really do. I think you guys have done a fantastic job.
I think people forget what is normal.
Right.
Or what's balanced.
Yeah.
So
right.
Whenever there's a little variation comparatively between, say, last year and now, people start getting a little bit, up in arms, wondering if it's some cataclysmic change, when really we're so far from what historically would be like a balanced market in terms of supply in the
Because
county.
the supply side has just been so depleted for so long.
So constrained. I mean,
Right.
if you go back, say, even pre-financial crisis, pre-08, people kind of would say Santa Clara County, a balanced equilibrium market, buyer-seller balance is about 5,000 or 6,000 listings in the county.
Santa
Clara
County.
County, right?
Yep.
Right. So that's, you kind of got
So 5,000 or 6,000 listings, homes for sale.
Correct.
Single-family homes,
Combined.
condos, combined.
Combined.
Condos, townhomes, single-family
Correct.
homes. Yep.
Combined. Yep.
What do you think would take to get back to that?
Well, so yeah, here we are. So we've been, roughly in this 1,000 plus or minus range for 5 years. And this last January of this year, 18, was the lowest start count in the county ever, which was under 400, which eclipsed the low point, prior low point was January of 2000, which was about maybe 850.
Yeah.
So, but it does, during, again, last we've been ranging between that 500, 1,000, and maybe 2,000 range. And it's just so hard for the inventory to build up in 1 year to get back to that 5,000 or 6,000 mark in any 1 year.
But do you really think we're ever going to get back to that?
Well, that's a good question.
Seriously.
I don't know. There's people are now finally starting to talk about a couple factors that we have been suggesting for 5 or 10 years as to why it is that way.
You mean why the inventory
Why
is so
the
low?
inventory is so low, correct.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, one is there's just limited land and it's so hard to build, and so they're really, in terms of like single family, there's been tons of apartments that have gone up in the valley. That's been the focus, but in terms of single family residential development, there's hardly really been,
Right, because there's no place for it.
no place for it. It's hard to build, right?
High density.
Right. So, but other conditions that it's almost like there's some tax structure dynamics that the higher prices go, the more they put downward pressure on people's motivation to sell.
Because the amount of tax that you're going to pay goes up.
Correct. So,
Right. So it disincentivizes people to want to actually
correct. And a lot of
buy
people might say, oh, well, that only affects people of a certain age or demographic. That doesn't, not really the case now, because before 1998, you could effectively roll roll an unlimited. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, man.
You could roll an unlimited amount of gain into a new property. It didn't matter if you had $100,000 or $100 million in gain. You could roll that into another primary residence and not pay any tax to do so.
Right.
It's a rollover. Okay.
Yep.
Eventually, you'd pay the tax someday, but in '98 came that 250,500. The exclusion, the 250,500 for single people, they get 250,000,
Which hurts a lot of people here in California.
Well, what happened, and initially it sounded like a good idea. Homeowners don't realize how that works, that cap gains exclusion, until they're thinking about doing something. So let's give an example now that, again, the higher prices have gone. This is an example of the more this puts downward pressure on inventory.
Right.
Let's say I was in my 20s and I, bought a home 15 years ago for $450,000.
Yep.
And got married, had some kids, and maybe I did some remodeling, maybe expanded a little bit. It's a 3-2, 1,400 square foot home, and somewhere in San Jose, Cambrian or something, and now it's 1.4. And I'm thinking, well, I'd like to maybe relocate to a different area, get a bigger house, talk to my realtor, sit down and say, well, your basis, you paid $450, you put in whatever to fix it up, your basis is let's say $600,000 is what you're into the house, but it's worth 1.4.
Okay.
So you're going to far exceed the $500,000 exclusion in order to make that move. So that homeowner is going to be exposed to cap gains on that delta.
Right.
Not to mention the fact that with Prop 13, their property tax base.
Right. So they're going to get hit with big capital gains.
Yep.
They're going to get hit potentially if they buy up,
exactly,
or even buy sideways, or even buy down. Right?
As you're saying,
buy anything, they're going to get hit with bigger property tax base.
Right. When you sell it, you almost can only buy a house that's less value than what you have.
But even then, like my mom, if she sells her house and buys a smaller, less expensive house, her tax base is still going to go up.
Right.
So we think that that's been helping to keep the.
Oh yeah, because what happens is, again, keep in mind, the higher prices go, the more that exposure gets for each of these people.
Yep.
So I kind of call this like frozen inventory.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you're not going to pay cap gains on $400,000 or $500,000 or $800,000 in order to make that move. It's just not worth it. People can't get their mind, so they keep the property.
Yeah.
They'll either keep it, and that's why you're getting a lot of people more improving where they're at, staying in place. And I think that's most people now that have owned their homes for more than 10 years in the Valley.
We just talked about the fact that there's this step up in basis, and heirs are maybe thinking about holding onto properties. I mean, do you think that that's actually contributing to the inventory being low?
Completely.
Is estate planning?
Oh, completely. Oh, absolutely. If you go to Palo Alto and work your way down the peninsula, absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So there you go. I mean, here's an example, right? I mean, I don't know what their situation is, but that could be someone that bought that house, a ranch home, 15 years ago, and now they're saying, you know what?
Instead of selling it, let's just actually
fix it up,
improve it, and make it bigger and better. It's in a great neighborhood.
Yep. So, but this time, if you look at the last 5-10 years, it's been really difficult to get credit. I mean, try refinancing or getting a loan.
Yeah.
If you don't have phenomenal credit and every single scrap of paper and actually have a job and have pay and whatnot for the,
they're not giving you.
So foundationally, the last 10 years has been pretty rock solid in terms of the people that have got into homes.
Yeah.
So I think as opposed to before the last crisis, we're in a different situation.
Right. So the underlying fundamentals are actually improved. Over the last time.
Correct.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So what's the market like right now? I mean, what are you seeing? Because we noticed, it seems, that inventory came up even just a little bit in the last few weeks.
Countywide, we're up 16%.
Up in what sense?
Of overall listings from last year.
Okay, so
roughly
number of listings is up 16%.
Correct. There's like 1,404 properties as of today.
Yep.
Class 1, condos, townhomes, single family. Last year, whatever the number might have been, 1,100. I just use an example, or 1,200. So you're talking, again, keep in mind that 5,000-6,000 equilibrium that we talked about. Now we're talking, we're up 100 or 200 from last year in this crazy low 1,000 to 1,400. So
which, though, in the desert, a couple of drops of water certainly doesn't hurt.
Right.
Yeah, that's sort of how I'm feeling about it.
So here's the theme for this year in my mind is seasonality.
Okay.
All right.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by seasonality is historically there's the market is fairly predictable in terms of when the lowest inventory point is, when the peak is, when most of the sales activity happens, when prices peak for the year.
Yep. When
things tend to kind of slow down a little because just behavioral focus on graduations, or
right.
summer.
That's what we're happening.
And then
right
fall, school comes, you get that little second push, and then you get So that's kind of their seasonality measurements that, like last year, really is uncharacteristic, and I've never seen this in 30 years, and I've talked to other people who've been in business as long or longer. The second half of 2017, there was zero seasonality. I mean, it was almost like it was the spring market for the whole second half. Super tight inventory, multiple offers, property selling for 100, 200, 400,000 over in November.
Yeah.
I've never seen that ever. It's like it just never...
And it rolled right into 18.
And it's rolled into the beginning.
It just didn't stop at all. Right, the first quarter at least, and a little extra.
Right, so it's not surprising that, one, we're seeing some seasonality now, and two, I do think underneath that there's some price resistance.
The prices have gone up so much at this point now that we're just feeling the pressure that people can't afford it, right?
They can't afford it, or they don't want it.
And they're
just looking and they're not seeing the value there, even if they can.
Yeah.
And so underneath the seasonality, and it's nothing to get too excited about in this moment. I think we'll be a lot smarter in 60 days from now as we get into going back into fall.
Yeah.
That there is some price resistance, there's probably some affordability issues, and on top of the fact, though, that this normal seasonality has occurred.
Yeah.
Right. It seems as if we've hit a ceiling as far as where the pricing is spiking. It's going gradually, but you can kind of have an understanding of where things are going and where they're going.
Right. And can I say one more thing on that? Normally, most of the appreciation for a year happens in the first half anyways. That's very normal.
Right.
Like prices will peak. If you take a measurement of values for the year, you'll see in spring that the peak values of the year will be then, and sometimes you even get a little bit of a tapering down towards the second half of the year. That's normal.
Slight tapering down at the second half of the year.
It just kind of, it's just how it goes.
So if you were a buyer, would you say that planning to buy towards the end of the year, like in the winter months, is the better
I personally have always, I just maybe by accident or design, I've typically bought in November, December, just because even though there's less available, seemingly there's less competition in terms of serious buyers. It's just
your experience
been
personally.
My view. It's not always.
But in working with buyers, I feel the same way. Just
sure.
November, December, January are kind of like the times to buy. But it depends also on what you need and what you guys are doing, right?
Right. Every downturn, you'll hear people say, it's too expensive to be here. CEOs are going to move their businesses away and on and on. Well, all that's happened is the opposite. The growth of certainly tech and the concentration of businesses and brain power in Silicon Valley has only just multiplied in a huge way in the last 30 years.
And intensified.
Yeah. And so this time, I really see the San Jose Google project and all that's planned down there as being very significant for the next 10, 15, 20 years.
I always say to Brian that it seems like San Jose to San Francisco on the 101 corridor is going to be just a connection of high-rises and high-tech buildings, headquarters, and offices. The way it's just growing.
But one of the smartest real estate people I know, who's much older than me and very successful, says, real estate's been the only thing he knows he's been guaranteed to make money if he can own it long enough.
Yeah.
And
right, because even if we see some downward pressure or an adjustment or even a disruption, it comes back.
It's over time. You have to hang in. And so, but now I think what people are saying is, hey, look, I'm going to bet on the Valley now, because with Google doubling down like that, it just kind of says that longer term this place is going to be a place where there's going to be a lot going on. I think Los Gatos is undervalued, in my opinion, for the long term. I think that you're going to see a fill-in from the San Jose tech development that's going to bring those upper-end buyers into this area. It's going to fill in Saratoga, Montecito, Los Gatos.
I feel like
in the next
that's already
5, 10,
happening.
15 years.
Right.
Yeah.
We're seeing it, I agree with you, Chris. It's about Los Gatos, Saratoga seems about a 25% discount versus the Mid-Peninsula.
Correct.
If I'm a home seller, I'm thinking about the balance of this year. I'm thinking, maybe I'll sell my house. I don't know. What do you think they can anticipate?
Well, is that, I think we're the
Slug bug.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
If you're a home seller, I think the market we've been in and that we're still in, right now where we're at, right? Know where values are at. It's hard to, if you have a 1 to 3 year window, this is probably a good time to get going, because if we do end up in something that's a little more of an adjustment period, that could impact values.
Right, and that could be around the corner.
Could be around the corner. So
we don't know.
You know what you have now, and then unfortunately, a lot of times sellers will wait. Of course, everybody wants to sell at the peak,
right?
But most people aren't able to do that. So selling into the strength, I think, is wiser at this point than waiting.
Yeah.
And now that's if you're looking at the next 1 to 3 years. Otherwise, you could wait for another 10-year cycle. You don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Buyers, I get back to again. If you got a longer-term view, I think that we've already talked about the reasons why you would want to, think long and not compete and try to get into something
and hold
on
to it.
And
stick with the fundamentals, right? Like, know that you can pay your mortgage, know that you've got reserves, know that you've got the income to be able to cover it, and you're probably going to be fine if your horizon of time is long enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right.
Great.
Anything else?
I think we got it.
We're back here at the office.
All right,
now,
gentlemen.
so,
hey, that was a nice tour. Thank you so much for including me.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
Okay.
Thanks for coming out and joining us.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Are you a mind reader?
I am.
Hopefully, I got some good stuff for you
I
to
got
read.
a deck of
No one wants to be, no one wants to be the last guy paying the.
Right, just passed me on an electric
Yeah, electric bike. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say he's not pedaling very hard to go that
he
fast.
must be doing. I mean, I'm doing 30 miles an hour. He must be doing 40 miles
He's
an
like
hour.
the bionic guy here, right?
One quick question. Do you guys know what they say when you see a Volkswagen driver? Do you know that game? Slug buddy, slug buddy. Sorry. Go ahead. Kirk, I'm sorry. Is that what it's called?
No, not slug
Punch
buddy.
buddy? Or what's it called?
Punch buggy or slug bug. No, I'm just the camera wise. When you have your hand moving
blocks
like
it.
this,
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's just your hand's going to be massive, and
It is okay. Yeah.